Hi, you're with Nadine van der Linden, and today I'm talking about a three-step preparation process for imagery rescripting. So most clients are able to do imagery rescripting without a lot of preparation, but there are a percentage of people who either refuse to do imagery rescripting, or you will see that they have a strong visceral response to you mentioning it, or they will say, I can't, or there will be a deep fear present in them around imagery rescripting. So the method that I'm going to be talking about today is a way to prepare, to scaffold clients into being ready to do imagery rescripting. And I think it really fits with the limited reparenting frame of schema therapy, because as a good parent, when a child can't do something, we try to break down that task in a way that helps them be able to do that. Or if our child is very afraid of something, a good parent literally does like the graded exposure and finds a way to support that child towards being able to stop the avoidance and come into contact with the feared situation or the feared object. So the sorts of clients that I'm talking about who may need this sort of a three-step technique are those clients who have been very deprived. They usually have emotional deprivation schema, and they are very uncomfortable with having needs met because of that. It feels very foreign to them. And they may also have a very strong punitive critic. So they fear that that will become activated by doing the rescript. And probably they're right. Okay, that can happen. So imagery scripting does create strong emotion in people, and we need to make sure that they're able to stay in their window of tolerance. When they do that, they will come into contact with all of the schema, so the memory and the emotions, the physical sensations, that will all get activated, not just the thought, right? And although a lot of people think that imagery rescripting is softer than EMDR therapy processing, in my experience, it's not. There's different clients that prefer one or the other, and there are sometimes ways in which we can use imagery rescripting to meet needs in a quicker, more accessible way, perhaps, than EMDR therapy, where we can build in some skills, but neither one is particularly soft. They are going to require a client to come into contact with feared material. So this three-step process that I'm talking about is using techniques that I've drawn from my therapy skills before I was a schema therapist and before I was an EMDR therapist. And it's really drawing from some of those exposure type skills that you might see in ERP and cognitive processing therapy. So I would begin with a client who's basically saying, I won't do the imagery, or I can't, or I see they feel like physically disgusted by it. For me, there's no point in pushing on that. That's kind of a bad parent role, where we just say, no, you're doing it, and it'll be fine once you do it. We actually need to address that resistance and help prepare clients to do that. So I would begin by saying, okay, so you don't feel comfortable or able to do this exercise as an imagery exercise. How about if we write down a script of what would potentially happen in this imagery exercise? So I'd ask the client to write that down, and you're using all those steps of the imagery rescript. So what's happening, then the entry of the healthy adult mode, whether that's the client or the therapist. With this sort of client, I think you would be assuming that they need a therapist or another healthy adult figure to help assist with the situation. And then the needs meeting and the resolution. So that would all get scripted in there. If you're like me and you love using imaginal nurturing and reparenting the needs through those sorts of scripts, it also works beautifully with that as well. So then most clients will be able to do that in a written form, and it just creates a level of distancing for them that means that the amount of sensation that they're going to experience is going to be less. So it's more likely to keep them in their window of tolerance. So once that has happened, I would then get the client to read out that script a few times so they get comfortable with accessing that material. But when people speak words, it tends to create more connection to the content again. So we're just upping that level of difficulty for the client. And then I would say to them, hey, when you were doing either of those, did you happen to see any of it in your mind? Did you get any pictures of it? And very often they will. So I'll be like, well, maybe if you've done that and it was okay and you were able to manage your emotional reactions and your punitive critic didn't get really loud, maybe we could do it with imagery as well. If they say no, that didn't happen, I think you can also just use a bit of coaching around, well, you've tolerated this. Would you like to give this a go? And I'll support you through it. And so then I would encourage the client to do it in imagery film where they're using a picture in their mind. You can use words like, let's make it like a movie, and that's creating a little distancing as well. And it's taking away from this idea that I might have to re-experience it or relive it. So we're always aiming for a redo with any of this processing of trauma material. We're never asking clients to relive, and some clients can become confused by that, partially because with the way that imagery works, it's hard for our brain sometimes to tell what is real and what is not real. And so then I would give the client the option of eyes open or eyes closed as they do the imagery movie of that script. And then following their ability to tolerate that, we then would move to a usual imagery script if it's necessary. Sometimes using that mental movie approach is pretty much like doing the imagery.